SQL Server has a concept in it called recovery models. There's 3 recovery models that are going to be available to you. These recovery models are snapshot, bulk logged, and full. These have basically been available for pretty much ever in the SQL Server product without really a whole lot of change to them. Now, these recovery models do a couple of things. They control the amount of logging that's going to happen within the database engine as data is being written to the database. They also control the recoverability of the database and how we can recover data, whether we can do a point-in-time restore or if we can only do a single point restore. And it also controls the amount of data that could be lost in the event of some sort of problem, how well protected our data is. So starting with the snapshot recovery model, we have a minimal amount of logging. With the snapshot recovery model, we have no point-in-time recovery as well. Now, a common misconception with the snapshot recovery model is that the snapshot recovery model is going to completely disable the logging within SQL Server, and this is actually not the case. It does do minimal logging for certain operations, but for most operations, full logging is still enabled. For example, if you're doing most insert, update, or delete operations, these are still going to be fully logged just like they always would be. Now, snapshot recovery model does minimize the recoverability of the database, because if the system were to crash in the middle of a data load, for example, we can only recover up to the most recent full backup or the most recent differential backup. We can't go past that using transaction logs or anything like that. We also can't do point-in-time recovery because there is no point-in-time recovery since we don't have any sort of transaction log trail. With the bulk logged recovery model, some of the commands are going to be bulk logged, but most of the commands are still going to be fully logged. Things that are going to be bulk logged are things like bulk insert operations. These are all going to be logged into the system as only bulk operations. What that means is when a bulk operation is run, only the page allocations are going to be logged, not the actual data change. So for example, when using the bulk logged recovery model, and I do a large insert using a bulk logged insert process, like for example through SQL Server integration services, I'm not actually logging the data that's being written to the data pages, only the fact that the data pages have been allocated to a table. So if something were to go wrong and there was a crash in the middle of the insert process, I wouldn't necessarily be able to roll those transactions forward and backwards, and I could end up with data problems and page corruption problems being reported because the data on the pages wouldn't match what SQL Server thinks they should look like. We do have point-in-time recovery using the bulk logged recovery model to a point. If we're doing a lot of regular log transactions, we'll have that recovery available to us through the transaction log backup and restore process. However, if there are bulk logged operations, we're not going to be able to do any point-in-time restore during those bulk logged operations because we don't have those bulk logged operations as logged operations. They are only logging the actual allocation of those pages. Now, when using the full recovery model, almost nothing is going to be bulk logged. Basically, everything is going to be a logged operation at that point. Very, very few exceptions. We do have point-in-time recovery because this is our highest level of logging. So it's our highest level of data protection and our highest level of availability and recoverability. With the full recovery model, you are going to have to do transaction log backups because you need to be able to do that point-in-time restore and have the ability to restore every single transaction that came through the system. Now, changing the recovery model is fairly simple. It's simply a quick alter database statement. So let's go ahead and look at what it takes to actually change the recovery model. So we have here SQL Server Management Studio, and we've got our sample database. So let's go ahead and right-click on the sample database and go to Properties. And then we can see the recovery model is listed on the Options tab. In this case, our recovery model is set to full already. So let's go ahead and change that to simple. We could click OK and make the change. Before we do that, let's go ahead and take a look at the script and see what it's going to take to actually do that change. As you can see, the command to make this change is fairly simple. Alter database, the name of the database we're going to change, set recovery simple, and then you can use a with statement if you want to. Now, the with statement is optional. Management Studio puts it in here as just part of the practice of creating the script in Management Studio. Once I run this script, the database recovery model will have changed. Now, the next thing you should always do when changing the recovery model of any database is to immediately perform a full backup. The reason we need to do a backup directly after we change the recovery model is so that we can then restore the database if need be. Now, most importantly, if we're going into full recovery model from simple recovery model, if we change the recovery model, we can then do transaction log backups. Without a full backup that's based on the full recovery model, there's not going to be any way to actually restore those transaction logs. We could end up with a database that's in the full recovery model that we can't actually restore for several hours because we haven't taken that first full backup. So in summary, there's 3 basic recovery models that we can pick from, and those have been the same 3 recovery models that have been available to us for quite some time. The recovery model that you pick is going to directly impact the backup and restore options that you have available to you. So make sure you have a good understanding of the recovery model and also what your backup and restore requirements are going to be so that you know which recovery model to select based on your requirements.